Look, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts.
That was Mike Pence at this month's vice presidential debate. Politicians may not always be the best arbiters of truth. According to the Washington Post, the number of false or misleading statements from President Trump has increased dramatically over the course of his 4 years in office. This election year, the Post's small team of fact-checkers released a book that examined more than 15,000 presidential claims. Here's Errol Barnett.
What they're doing is a hoax with the ballots.
For 3.5 years as president, Donald Trump has made tens of thousands of claims.
Mexico is going to pay for the wall. Don't worry about it.
The tax cut, ours is the biggest ever passed.
Glenn Kessler, the Washington Post fact-checker, has been trying to keep track of all of them.
Politicians speak in code words, and they use phrases to mislead people.
But Kessler says no one does it more than Donald Trump. It's not even close.
He's basically broken the fact-checker meters.
Kessler's meter of mistruths, a scale of Pinocchios ranging from 1 to 4.
Previously, most politicians would get 4 Pinocchios, our worst rating, maybe 15 to 20% of the time. But President Trump gets 4 Pinocchios 65% of the time.
I better say think, otherwise they'll give me a Pinocchio.
His work with Salvatore Rizzo and Meg Kelly has been acknowledged by the president and is used across the media landscape to assess the president's truthfulness.
Here's the Washington Post breakdown of all his lies and misleading claims. According to the Washington Post, since taking office,
the president has now made more than
16,000 false or misleading claims.
Now in their book, Donald Trump and His Assault on Truth, they lay out the president's biggest fabrications.
Good luck, everybody.
Kessler first covered Trump, the businessman, in 1990 for Newsday.
And he really hasn't changed much. But what was different was that people weren't necessarily recording it on a day-to-day basis.
3 decades later, fact-checking President Trump is an all-consuming job.
He lies about just about everything. It's about himself, his persona. He lies about his enemies. He lies about policy issues. He misleads about things that he could actually not have to mislead about.
Take, for example, the president's claim of job creation in his administration.
Since my election, we have created 7 million new jobs.
Kessler points out that 600,000 of those jobs were created after Trump's election, but before he was sworn into office.
There's no reason to mislead about that, and yet he does.
How much of this is normal and typical when it comes to the White House?
Well, every president lies at some point, but most presidents are known for one big lie. You can think of, George W. Bush talking about weapons of mass destruction.
That the Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal.
Or Barack Obama, and, if you want your health care plan, you can keep your health care plan.
They'll see that if Americans like their doctor, they will keep their doctor.
What's unusual about President Trump is it's a constant series of misstatements.
There's no better example than one of the president's freewheeling rallies.
I was the man of the year in Michigan. Can you believe it?
For the book, Kessler studied his longest one to date, last December in Battle Creek, Michigan.
The rallies are really where he goes in overdrive.
I have the greatest economy in the history of this country.
In 2 hours, Kessler counted more than one statement presented as fact per minute, with 67% labeled as false or misleading. Kessler became a full-time fact-checker nearly 10 years ago. 5 years later, CBS This Morning Saturday profiled him and the team at factcheck.org during the 2016 campaign. And since then, new players have entered the field.
I brought back 700,000 jobs. They brought back nothing.
Daniel, how do you rate that claim?
So everything about that claim, Wolf, is inaccurate.
But some in journalism worry it's not enough. Last month, a member of the New York Times editorial board wrote, "Facts are vital, but they are insufficient." And in a column headlined, "Fact-checking Trump's lies is essential, it's also increasingly fruitless," Kessler's colleague at the Post, Margaret Sullivan, wrote, "Fact-checking may make less of a difference than ever."
With all due respect to Margaret, who I think the world of, I don't think she's right about that. He has never achieved above 50% popularity. And the Washington Post, we arranged to have a poll where we tested 11 of his biggest falsehoods and asked Americans whether they believed it or not without identifying whether Trump had said it. And most Americans didn't believe it. So I'm not sure that this stuff is working for him.
For the past 3 years, Kessler has focused mostly on the president, but that's changed somewhat during the campaign.
His 2017 tax bill slashed taxes on companies that send production and jobs overseas.
Joe Biden has his own history of exaggeration and embellishments.
How has your time during the Trump presidency impacted the way you fact-check Vice President Joe Biden and his campaign?
Well, it hasn't impacted the way we fact-check Biden. We have less time, probably, to fact-check Biden, because every day Trump comes up with something new. So to some extent, you could say Trump is harming himself because we only have so much bandwidth. But I just gave 4 Pinocchios to Joe Biden the other day, or his campaign. So we have not stopped fact-checking Joe Biden.
At the end of your book, you write about the lasting impacts on the presidency post-Trump. What will that be?
A lot depends on whether or not Trump gets reelected. If he's defeated, I think politicians will say, you know, telling constant falsehoods is not necessarily a ticket to success.
But if he wins?
If he wins, well, I mean, all bets are off.
For CBS This Morning Saturday, Errol Barnett.
An exhausting job. Glenn has to be a glutton for punishment.
Yeah,
right?
That's a lot of work. It is the interesting thing, though. If you keep telling these lies, are they believed at some point? If you keep them in the ether, or do people pay attention to what is fact and what is exaggeration, shall we say?
Great point.